Today, we document another king. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I've been searching for one of these for my personal collection after letting my last ones go, and I've documented quite a few of these in the past. But being the fanciest Norlin Era guitar in the Les Paul world, I figured you guys wouldn't mind seeing another one of these because it's just too special of a guitar to throw in a bulk unboxing episode. But if you're not sure what I'm talking about, check out this episode right here. It's an ultra romanticized video, and I honestly don't think I could create it again better. But don't worry, we'll still cover some of those details again today, but I really just want to appreciate this piece for what it is. The owner of this one has had it since the early 80s. He had bought it secondhand, and he's played it throughout the time of him owning it. This is more so a player's grade the Les Paul, but what's really cool is it's another consecutive number from the ones that I've documented, and I just absolutely love the headstock on this one. It's got some great wood grain. But just as a quick recap of the history, the Les Paul was the fanciest Les Paul Gibson created. The origin story of it is a little bit shrouded in mystery. Some guys say it was supposed to be the 20th anniversary Les Paul because the first prototype was started to be designed in 1974, because the real 20th anniversaries that we got just had a fancy inlay at the 15th fret. So it wasn't really all that crazy. However, other people say this might have been a bicentennial American Les Paul. That was in 1976, and that's when these first came out to the public. But essentially the gist of these things is if something was plastic and could be made out of wood, they would do it. So we have things like wooden binding, top and back. You've got your wooden knobs. You've got the wooden pick guard, wooden pickup rings, poker chip. Originally the switch tip also would have been wood, but this one has been replaced because it probably broke at some point in time. Part of your nuts also wood. You got your wooden headstock veneer, truss rod cover. And then the other cool thing that you might have noticed is you've got a flame maple top. You've got the flame maple edges. You also got the flamed back, crazy flamed neck. And in case you missed it, you have multi-layers of wood to form your binding. So it's just a really fancy guitar. The story behind the maple that they used on these guitars is Gibson had just recently purchased it from a violin maker who went out of business or something like that, and it's like the finest Austrian maple that you can find. So some of these examples are quite extraordinary. Most times you get more pinstripey flames like this one. Sometimes you can find a wider flamed one. But they made 77 of these throughout 1976 through about 1980, and the majority of them were numbered with one of these plaques that told you what number it is. And I've personally documented number 8, 26, 39, 40, and 62. Had I kept all of them, I would actually have 3 serial numbers in a row, which would have been pretty cool. Now you can see, we've got a little bit of a chip out of our headstock. We've got some nicks and dings around the edges, nasty gouges on our top. However, since the finish has aged so well, it hides most of that. So it's far from the cleanest or most original TLP that we've documented, but at the same time, this one has character. And the asking prices of these are going insane on the used market. They're not selling for 40 grand, but that's what people are asking. Typically, you see these sell in the 15 to 22K range, but unfortunately, all it takes is one person to pay a crazy amount and then everybody else follows suit. So I'm gonna hold on to this one because I think it'd be fun in my future museum to have a really cool fancy guitar that people would want to play and just hand to them and be like, hey, you want to play the Les Paul? But in my opinion, they're more so collector's pieces because I've yet to find one that I actually enjoy playing. They're very stiff feeling guitars, which makes them great for power chords and everything. And yeah, can you do solo work? Sure, but something about these, they're just really stiff for whatever reason. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to see what parts might have been replaced. Inside my new TLP, let's go ahead and check this out. You might have noticed that these pickups are rather strange. Their rings are larger than normal, and that's because they have extra spring adjustments. So not only can you go up and down, but you can also tilt the pickup. And they accomplish that by literally just soldering another leg onto your pickup. But these are the original T-tops in here. However, you'll see that other pickups have been in this guitar. And you'll notice that the back of the rings are raw, but the top is actually a finished product. Gibson actually outsourced the wooden appointments of these. So sometimes on the later ones, you'll actually see they'll substitute in some brass parts, like brass nut and a brass poker chip, as well as your switch tip. And our routes look a little bit strange here because of our third adjustment leg. They had to route the guitar out to accommodate that. So in documenting many of these TLPs, the very early ones will still have transitional neck tenons, and they'll also have pancake bodies, meaning within the mahogany core of this guitar, there's another maple layer that we don't see. But now that I know what I know now about pancake bodies being multi-layered, we actually do have one of the pancake layers, but I doubt we're going to see that second one in our control cavity. Pretty much all the same stuff is true over here in our bridge pickup cavity. We've got a harmonica bridge, which is stock on most TLPs. They have a little bit wider range of travel, so they're technically superior products in that aspect, but they're Schaller made in Germany. And then originally this would have had a TP6 tailpiece, but the owner was telling me he doesn't like those things, and I agree with him. They're really cool, and they do have a purpose. However, I feel a regular tailpiece feels better. I tend to find TP6 equipped guitars to be stiffer, so that's why I actually have some hopes that this one might actually play pretty good. But we'll take a second to appreciate our poker chip. It's actually multiple layers. It's probably a birch and rosewood layer, and they just dye the birch. That'd be my best guess, because they did that exact same thing along the edge. So you have multiple layers of binding. It just makes these things look so fancy. Whether you have a natural one that's aged, a natural one that's clean, or even one of the rarer wine reds. You've just got a little bit of additional color over here. And the other cool thing is our knobs over here. They're not regular speed knobs. They actually have a little bit of an hourglass figure to them. Helps you grip onto them a little bit as well. But they're made of rosewood. However, this is not Brazilian rosewood as far as I'm aware. When you take your pickguard off, you can see what this actually started life as. You see how much lighter that is? For whatever reason, all the 1977 ones within this serial number range tend to amber over in this color. And it's not just necessarily how they were stored. I think it has something to do with the lacquer that they sprayed on it, because they've all evenly aged. In fact, number 39, in hindsight, is one of my favorite ones because it has such a light rosewood binding to it. It gives it a very country western feel. Whereas this one, it's pretty dark rosewood, but still looks nice. Take a look at our pickguard, nice and shiny. I like how you can still see the wood grain through it though, but the back is unfinished, for the most part. You can see a little bit of lacquer overspray. Another thing I've noticed between TLPs is sometimes all the wooden parts will have a number written on the back of them. If one does, they all should. If none of the parts do, it also just seemed to be how it was. So just to reiterate, this is still a maple top. You can see that right there. But then as far as the maple on the side, it's about an 1/8 inch thick. It's not paper thin veneer, but we'll measure that on the back. So they bend it around the edges, kind of like they did a 335, and then they just have a flat one on the back. These are not like Les Paul Supremes that have a carved top and back. I love the fretboards on these things. I love it so much when Valiant wanted to spec me out a guitar, I had them copy this, where it's an ebony rosewood ebony sandwich. So they glued those pieces of wood together before making your fretboard, and some examples are cooler than others. Like this one's pretty dark, you really don't see it unless you're getting right up on top of it. But that's something not enough manufacturers do. It's cool to see all the different wood grains here with the rosewood in the center of ebony. But take a look at these awesome abalone inlays. That one's pretty cool, but oh my goodness, when I first saw that one, that is insane figuring. I love it. The abalone that they used for these inlays usually are pretty cool. They'll have a lot of ring-like figuring and eyes and other nice formations. It's not over-the-top abalone like you'd see a lot today. But you will notice we are missing fret nibs. Is that a thing that the TLPs did? No, this thing has actually been refretted, which is kind of a shame that we lost the fret nibs. But since the rest of the fretboard is so fancy, my eye's not even drawn to it. But we also have the abalone on the edge with the prominent black binding. But we have a 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12 inch fretboard radius. Pretty wide nut at 1.74 inches. That increases to 210 by the 12th. These are usually pretty skinny necks. First fret neck depth of 0.83 and 0.96 by the 12th. But the heel's starting, so it's going to feel a little bit thinner than that. Here that is on the contour gauge, 1st fret and 12th fret. It's got a little bit of flatness to it, but then it completely rounds over. I'd love to find a big chunky neck the Les Paul. It's possible it's out there, but every single one that I've had so far has been pretty thin. But now check out the nut. It's got rosewood, it's got a red layer, and then a bone layer. Now this guitar actually had a different nut on it at one point in time, but before he sold it to me, he took it to a shop, had all the frets leveled and recrowned, and they put the original nut back on. You'll see there's actually a small shim right here, because the frets that are currently on it are taller than stock. The shim's most noticeable on this side. It looks like a small finish check in that area as well. But should I want to get rid of the shim in the future, I just have to plane these frets down a little bit more. But oh yes, I think this is the defining feature of this particular one, the headstock veneer. It's got a lot of good wood figuring. It's dark, it's light at the same time, and you can see underneath our truss rod cover how dark it would have started life. Typically, my favorite TLPs are ones that have been faded in the sun a little bit on the headstock. That helps bring out that natural rosiness, and this one's got all the rings around it. Kind of looks like a bullseye. Another fancy thing about these is we have real mother-of-pearl tips on the tuners. Most times when you see this on fancy guitars, they're just like a pearloid, but these are real deal mother-of-pearl. And here's a close look at our truss rod cover. It reads the Les Paul. This one's pretty dark, so you don't get to appreciate the rosewood too much. But here you can see the multiple layers of it and the natural rosewood side. Moving over to the back side, we can take a look at the beauty. So it looks pretty clean, right? But when you get it in the light, you can actually see quite a bit of worming and marks and nicks and dings. So it's definitely player's grade, but it presents in a respectable manner. I was kind of scared buying this one. I didn't know how it would actually look in person. But I think the thing is, it's just so fancy literally everywhere. Your eye doesn't have time to see the imperfections, but we've got some good movement on the back here. So here's what I was talking about earlier. Now, if you were to measure it right here, that's like, what, about 1/8 of an inch? But you have to remember, you have to measure it from up here. So it's about 1/4 of an inch thick for the back. But here you can see the full-on mahogany body. But yes, just like I was expecting, there is no additional sandwich layer right there, like sometimes you'll find on the earlier TLPs. But as you can tell from our solder joints, other pickups have been in here at one point in time. As far as the pots and caps, everything's looking stock original. These all date to late 1977, which matches our serial number plaque pretty good. Here's a look at our wooden backplate, nice and dark brown, and our switch plate too. Now originally this would have had a rosewood output jack plate. It's actually a rosewood brass rosewood combination, and they were quite prone to falling off, so I'll probably put that back on when it gets sent to me. Also part of the missing parts is the shielding tin. He is sending that separately though, just like the output jack plate. But unfortunately, we do not have the original strap buttons. For the time being, I put these replacements on it, but you can see there's a discoloration in the wood, probably due to one of those felt things from a strap lock system that discolored the finish. But you'll notice in the cutaway here, we have an additional block of rosewood. I would assume they did that because it's very hard to do a perfect bending of your maple around the entire edge, so they opted to do it in sections. Further proof of that is on the bottom. You have this trapezoid shape right there. That way, again, they didn't have to do one continuous bended piece. Personally, I've always really liked these features because you get additional layers of the red and brown and the natural in between, and just adds to the fanciness of this thing. Lots of nicks and dings on the edges. This thing was well enjoyed. We'll take a quick scan of our bass side as well. A little bit cleaner, but still has wear. Next thing that's interesting, you do get a small heel cap, which Les Pauls typically do not get, and that also appears to be a dark rosewood. Take a look at this wood grain. It might not be the flamiest neck we've seen on a TLP. I mean, it's still good, but it's got a lot of wood grain, which I like. We've got a ding through the finish right there before we get to our ultra volute. I just love how Kalamazoo guys at first were like, no, we don't want to do volutes on Les Pauls. But then by the end, they just fully embrace them and make them the biggest honkinest things ever. Now, if you look around each of these tuners, there's a different imprint from another Schaller tuner. That's because they used to run it with a different set. And after having the original set put back on, I can kind of understand why. I've actually never had any issues with those Gibson branded Schallers, but those ones, they're not as tight as the others. But for aesthetic purposes, we've got the originals now. But here's our mother of pearl plaque dedicating this as number 41, 12/7 of 77. And if you own a TLP, this will be interesting. You can find a traditional serial number underneath your plaque. If you want to know if the one that you're looking at has this, look for the Made in USA stamp. If it has this impression, it's going to have this one. But if it doesn't have that, you won't have that. And both configurations are considered correct. It depends when they made it. There's a good look at our chunk. He said he has that piece of wood somewhere. He just can't for the life of him find it. So maybe one day we can glue that thing back on. My big thing is the face of the headstock wasn't affected. It's not like you're missing it off the top side and the binding's gone. It's just the piece of wood on the back, so you don't even know it from a display standpoint. Do a quick blacklight test here. Just in case you didn't believe me that the rosewood parts are finished, you can tell here because they glow, because they have that clear coat lacquer over top of them. Even your knobs also have that. This helps show you some of the nicks and dings and gouges around the edge.
I wouldn't say this thing was trashed by any means, it was just lovingly played. Our headstock's looking pretty good here, but it looks like there might have been a little bit of overspray right there at one point in time, because it doesn't glow as much. They might have did that when they did the nut or something. Looking on the back, we can see a little bit of stand rash. Thankfully, that doesn't show through in regular lighting situations. Usually, if you see it there, you'll see some on the other ends, but as of right now, I'm not seeing it. But that might explain some of our light dings over here. And our neck is in pretty good shape, but you can see a little bit of lacquer clear coat wear just from being used. Thankfully, no breaks, cracks, or repairs. Well, unless you count the headstock chip being sliced off. All said and done, it weighs 9 pounds, 11.7 ounces. Believe it or not, that's not too bad for one of these, but it's still pretty heavy. Let's go ahead, plug this one in, and hear how it sounds. Now that we know all about TLP number 41, what are my final thoughts on this? It's a little bit slinkier feeling than some of the other ones that I've played, but I still wouldn't say it's the slinkiest feeling guitar. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, slinkiness, like some guitars, they just feel stiff on the strings. Sometimes it's due to like the tailpiece that you're using. Other times it's just the neck shape profile can affect that a little bit. So for these, I'm thinking it's kind of a combination, but it's just something you kind of had to put up with if you want to have the king of the Les Pauls. However, the same thing rings true. These are great power chord guitars. It's pretty much the only thing I wanted to play on this guitar. They do sound nice, full, and round. So Steve Howe was definitely onto something about that, and it was not just his personal one. The Norlin era was known as the time when they were doing cost-cutting things, you know, trying to make it more a business rather than just making the finest instruments that they could. But there are some real gems within the Norlin era that are just beautiful, and even the regular production ones. Even yet today, most of the lemons have been reworked into something that is pretty good. So if you ever see old internet forums saying Norlin era guitars, they're just not good, don't necessarily believe it, because through education of my channel and people just being nostalgic over the guitars that they grew up with, we've seen the prices of these things exponentially explode. Like when I first bought my TLP, these were 7 to 10K-ish guitars, to put things into perspective, and it really wasn't that long ago that I got into them. But at the end of the day, it's really not about money. I'm happy just to have one of these in my collection again because they're so cool. These are kind of like spotlight specials to me. I think it'd be fun to document every single one, but I'm happy with the ones I've documented so far. All right, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.